This week, Joey and I are in Arizona. We got invited down by Herman Weideman of Peregrine Bullets. We were lucky enough to be able to follow along for some youth hunters and their very first elk hunt. Now what was cool for Joey and I was we got to see some new country, but we got to meet some incredible people. And it was more than a hunt. It was more of a bonding experience for the dads and these young hunters, and it was really special for us to be able to be a part of that. We took off out of town, we got headed up into camp, and once we got settled in, the very next morning, we were ready for the hunt.
Big days here.
Off we go.
As daylight appeared on the horizon, Herman and his daughter Courtney decided to slow down and pick their way through the timber. Herman had scouted this area for a couple days prior to the hunt, and he knew it held a great number of elk. We knew that as well because we were seeing tracks everywhere we went. There were rubs, there were tracks, and we actually started to hear some bugles as we moved higher up into the higher country. Herman and Courtney were in the lead, and they took their time getting to a vantage point where Herman knew the elk would like to cross. On our way there, we actually got surprised. We were walking through the timber and looked across the canyon, and there was a cow elk. Now this is what these kids were hunting for. They had cow elk tags. From my vantage point, it was a perfect shot, but from where Courtney and Herman were, they just quite couldn't get a clear shot, and Courtney wasn't real comfortable with that distance, so she let it go. That was the sign of a hunter growing up. One of the coolest parts of this trip for Joey and I was not just seeing new country and being in elk camp, but seeing the bonding experience between Herman and Courtney. Elk hunting is fun, but sitting back and watching Herman be the teacher and Courtney be the student was really an incredible experience for us. That first afternoon, it didn't take long before we were covered up in elk. From where I was sitting behind Courtney and Herman, I could hear a bull bugling, so I backed up a little bit to call to him to see if I could get him closer. I figured if the bull came closer, the cows would follow. We had a couple different bulls actually bugling, so we know there were two different herds around us. And we figured it was just a matter of time before one presented itself. We were just hoping we had enough time in the day and we didn't run out of daylight. Off to my left, all of a sudden I saw two elk. Herman was trying to point them out to Courtney, but it was really thick there and she just couldn't get a bead on them. Actually, from my vantage point, I couldn't see them that well either. I just saw legs moving through the timber. The good thing was they were heading in the right direction where hopefully they were going to show up right below Courtney and she was going to be able to get a shot. Unfortunately, that cow moved through before Courtney could get a really steady rest, and again, she elected to pass up a less than perfect shot. You know, Courtney was a real trooper on this hunt. We walked a lot of miles in some very steep country. There were some very hot days. She always had a smile on her face. She always stayed positive. And that's half the battle with hunting. Anybody who's hunted, especially elk, you know that the odds of seeing them and getting them aren't real great. But you know what? She kept after it. She kept with it. And no matter how many times that things didn't go in her way, she never gave up. The next afternoon, Joey and I were not able to go with Herman and Courtney, but they kept after it. They headed back up into the high country, and wouldn't you know it, they got covered up in elk. What was even more special was that Courtney got to hunt with a very, very special family heirloom.
Like,
Shaking constantly, could not stop, but then after I shot, then they didn't fall down, or she didn't fall down, and so I thought I missed, so I yelled, "Oh no, I missed!" And so then I was like trying to like cock it back to like reload the bullet, and then I saw her fall, and I was so thankful because I could not move. I was like this the whole time, and then I just like fell into my dad's arms, and it was like hurt.
All right, the rifle I'm holding here is a 1931 8x60S Mauser, and its designation is Africa type. It has a 700 millimeter barrel, which is about 27.5 inches, and it's been in our generation, in our family for 4 generations. It's got the W right here, which designates Weideman. It's all original, and my grandfather's good friend actually owned a gun store in Windhoek, Namibia, and ordered him this rifle from the factory. I estimate about 1932 or 33, my grandfather actually hunted a kudu in Namibia with this rifle, and that picture ended up in the 1937 Mauser catalog. So the two pictures that were taken with this rifle was one, my grandfather standing very stoically with this rifle in a three-piece suit in the forest in Windhoek with his kudu and holding this rifle. And the picture that actually appeared in the catalog was this rifle leaning against the kudu on the ground. And underneath it, it says A. Weideman, which his name was Arthur Weideman. He was the president of the Hunting Federation of Namibia, and so maybe it was something to honor him to put his picture in that catalog.
The next morning, we got to share camp with Daniel Jackson and his son Nathaniel. Now, this was actually going to be Nathaniel's first hunt where he was hunting for himself. He's accompanied his dad and brothers on some other hunts, but this time, he was going to be the hunter. We headed out in the dark because we wanted to try and get to a vantage point where the elk had been crossing. What was cool was walking through this forest, we could hear these bulls bugling, so we knew we were heading in the right direction. We could hear a couple bulls bugling, but man, we just could not pick them up in this timber. So we decided to move to another area. We knew there were elk all over the place, but like usual, we were just having a hard time putting our eyes on them. Midday, we were just not having any luck locating any elk, so the guys decided to try a new tactic. They had a tree stand that they had set up prior to the season over a water hole. That afternoon, we decided to try a different area. It wasn't that we weren't in the elk in the first area, we were just having a hard time getting in front of them. So we decided to try an area a little higher up where Daniel knew it held a bunch of elk. But I gotta be honest with you, this road was less than desirable. So we got up in the high country and set up in actually a really good location. There was a couple different ridges leading down into this canyon with a couple of trails. And it didn't take long before we saw our first elk. It was a cow and she was moving through. I decided to get back and call, hopefully to stop her so that Nathaniel could get a shot. We could see the legs of this cow, but we just couldn't see the body. And she wasn't moving. She was not going to come out and give us a clear shot. But we had to be patient. We had to wait and see if she would come out in front of us and this young man would have his opportunity. So we decided to move off, not very far from where we saw that elk, in the direction that she was traveling. Nathaniel took the lead, and he was going to head to an area where there was basically a trail that it kind of went down into this gully, so to speak, and it looked like a very well-used trail. So we were hoping that once we got up here, he would finally have his opportunity at his very first elk. Well, the elk just wouldn't cooperate that afternoon. But what an amazing day. Not only being out in some new country, being able to watch these two bond. I mean, that was the whole idea for this trip, was to watch these dads and these kids have this experience together. The night came to a close. We decided to get back to camp. The guys were going to make a nice campfire and head out again the next day. Unfortunately, we couldn't go with them. And, wouldn't you know it, they got into the elk.
Yeah, so we walked, we heard some bugling over, the knoll right by our camp, so we, walked over there, and we saw, as we were heading over the knoll, before we could even see the herd, we saw a cow elk over to our right. So I, aimed in and actually had it in the sights, but I was kneeling down, so my dad's like, get against the tree because you're not stable enough. So I, went to get against the tree, and then by that point didn't have a clear shot. So then we went over the hill to try to see the herd, and we didn't see the herd. It had gone across the control road and up the other side. So then we just decided to go around and sit on a face of a mountain where we could look down into a valley. It was a really nice spot. And then we sat down and we were waiting there for probably 45 minutes around there. Maybe. Yeah. And then a cow walked 10 yards in front of us and was just sitting there, and then it stopped and looked at us, and we just sat so still trying to get it not to notice us, and then it tried listening for maybe 30 seconds, and then it didn't end up seeing us, and it just walked out and gave us a nice shot at 50 yards or something like that. And so I shot it in the vitals and stuff.
Yeah?
Yeah. It's pretty good.
That's good.
This week was a little bit different experience for Aaron and I. We were behind the camera instead of in front of it. And it was so fun just to watch these dads bonding with their kids, giving them back the information on how they were taught to hunt.
It was a great week, and for me it kind of took me back to my childhood. I grew up hunting with my dad just like these kids did, and then I was fortunate enough to take my kids hunting throughout the years. So for me, I got to sit back and kind of witness this bonding experience from the outside. This next generation of hunters, they are the ones that are going to lead us into the future. They're the next group of conservationists, and they're the next group who's going to be giving back.